Good morning and welcome to everyone. Hope everyone's doing okay today and is trying to stay cool. It's very hot where we are and probably very hot where most of you are as well. Schneider Electric and Advantage Industrial Automation are excited to present Getting Future Ready with Digital Optimization of Power Assets. I'm Bert Dierdorf, Vice President of Sales at Advantage. One of our core focus areas as an organization is helping our customers reduce energy cost. There are a variety of ways to achieve this goal, to achieve this savings, depending on obviously the application and also the industry. But one of the key issues has always centered around trying to turn raw data into useful information. I've been in this industry over 30 years, and there has never been an easier time to achieve this goal. With me today is Mark Nolan of Schneider Electric.
Yeah, thanks, Bert. Really appreciate the opportunity to present in today's webinar alongside Advantage Industrial Automation. Really appreciate the partnership, the expertise that you all bring to the table, and the access to customers that we're getting here today to share the story. I'm Mark Nolan. I'm the Director of Offer Marketing for Digital Power. My entire 24-year career has been spent in this space in various capacities. I've been a field application engineer and done field deployment of energy management systems for customers at their sites. I've done sales, and obviously today I do offer management and marketing. And so being in this industry, I've seen a lot of evolution, from just, installation of multifunction meters and just starting with that data gathering journey to now, the advanced opportunity we have in analytics and the consultative services that go along with that to really meet what are the rising challenges in the market that our customers face today.
Yeah, great.
So today, we're going to cover electricity 4.0. You hear this buzzword a lot out in the marketing world, and we want to talk about, what is that really? We're trying to demystify some of the buzzwords that you hear out in the industry, and honestly sort of simplify what feels like an overwhelming challenge in the market today for a lot of our customers. And the things that our customers are facing, obviously folks in this audience, this is not going to be new to some of you. You're living this every day, but the energy landscape itself is changing. So you're seeing the rise of more electrical sources. You're seeing the decommissioning of coal-fired plants on the utility grid. You're seeing industries, municipalities starting to put in things like solar and wind generation for the sake of sustainability and for the sake of resilience, as the grid and infrastructure ages. The addition of those types of resources adds complexity to the opportunity to sort of manage what has typically been, generation, transmission, distribution, very simple. And now you get this cogeneration all over the grid. Utilities are trying to figure out for themselves, industries are trying to figure out for themselves, how do you still keep that coordinated, right? So that the grid is resilient and so that your facility can withstand some of the rising challenges with things like more severe storms and things that we're seeing. Those things are happening more often today. You're seeing the rise of more electrical loads as well. With the rise of the electric vehicle, there's going to be a huge charging demand placed on the grid and the infrastructure. You're seeing people transition over to electric heating as an efficient source of heat. The addition of those loads puts strain on that grid. But it's interesting as well, it creates an opportunity as we start rethinking the way we use electricity and generate it. Electric vehicles also can become a source of power, backup power for your home. You think about some of the truck commercials and stuff you see right now, that's part of what they're touting, right? And so even at the residential level, we're starting to see this complexity starting to rise. And then, it's the bulk point here is electricity is a must. The number of disruptions coming from the grid is increasing over the last few years, but our tolerance for outages has really gone down. The cost is rising. What it costs you an impact to customer satisfaction, production. If you're in a continuous process environment, just having to restart those processes, it's just really costly and painful these days for that electricity to go out. And so when you're managing a facility, you have all of these rising challenges. While you have those challenges in the electrical distribution system itself, you're also seeing this rise of intelligent devices. If we baseline against 2014, they said there's about 23.6 billion intelligent sensors out in the grid, and in the distribution within industrial and commercial facilities. And they expect that to essentially triple by 2025. 75 billion intelligent devices out there gathering data, right? And so we all have these systems that, for various parts of our operation, whether it's electrical or mechanical, process automation, things like that, we have a computer that's gathering up all this data and turning that into information. And even with all of that intelligence, all of that information at our fingertips, sometimes just discerning what does all that really mean for me is really difficult and overwhelming. And so, as you stated in your opening there, Bert, we see a real opportunity as the landscape is changing, as the offers are changing, the expertise are kind of rising through partners like Advantage Industrial offers and services through Schneider Electric, that the opportunity to turn that data into something that's actionable and real to meet some of these challenges is right at our fingertips. It's now, it's not something we're looking to do in the future. And so there's a real opportunity to take advantage of these challenges and not really just take them as challenges and frustrations, but opportunities to change the landscape of our business. A lot of businesses are they're valued today not just on profit and margin and revenue that they generate. Sustainability is becoming a real part of that story that they're telling to the investor market, and companies that have these sustainability goals and these strategies are being valued higher, right? And so it's those companies that are openly attacking these challenges and saying, you know what, we're changing the way we're doing business to meet this head on. They're the ones that are getting the most investment in the market today. And so, if we sort of break this down at the facility level, what does all this now mean? You take all of those challenges, you take all of those opportunities, you put them in the bucket, and then you see sort of in the day-to-day, what other things are we trying to mitigate? It's 22% of workplace fires are electrical in origin, right? So understanding what's going on in your electrical distribution system, seeing a problem before it becomes a problem, right? Seeing the symptoms, being able to diagnose it and address it proactively helps reduce the likelihood of having an incident of like an electrical fire in your facility. We were talking about the rising cost of outages. Power outages cost the U.S. economy $110 billion. It's a lot of money, right? And rather than having a cost, a risk in your business that ends up costing your company money, why not take some of that risk, turn it into investment, raise the awareness of what's going on in your facility, and proactively, again, attack some of these needs, these issues before they do become a problem. And what we also see from an efficiency standpoint is about 60 to 80% of buildings, if you look at their infrastructure efficiency, it remains untapped. So when we talk about energy savings, it's there to be had. But oftentimes we don't have enough visibility in our facilities to understand where it is to be had, the actions we need to take to go and capture that opportunity. And so, just some stats from the market here, things that we all know in the back of our mind, the risk and things that are there, the opportunities that are there. But it really helps us quantify the vastness of the opportunity that we see here in investment and understanding in these digital infrastructures. And so, as you had said, Bert, when we opened up, we have all this data. As I was saying before, it comes into these servers. We have these huge databases that are full of all this useful data. And the industry used to operate such that a company, an individual, a facility engineer would invest in these systems. They would get all this data, and you would have people there that could sit down and analyze it, right? They could look at the trends and the charts, and they could make these decisions because they had a depth of subject matter expertise in certain parts of that facility, whether it was the process, whether it's the electrical distribution, the building automation, or whatever. And what we've seen is over time, as the intelligent devices and the access to information has gone up, we've had the retirement of a lot of these subject matter experts. And with the efficiencies that are built into the way we're doing business, automated systems, those types of things. Oftentimes, that one subject matter expert isn't directly replaced, right? You may lose 3 or 4 of those people for every one person that's hired to replace them. And so now you end up, if you're managing a facility, a production process or whatever, you have all of this information at your fingertips, and you're being asked to take on a much broader scope than what people used to take in the past. And so not only is it difficult to get into the depth of information maybe in one area, but now you're trying to consume data across many platforms, and you're trying to manage all of that as an individual. And it unfortunately, and this isn't a knock on us as human beings, it's just a matter of capacity. You can be really wide and very shallow in depth, right, on a lot of these things. And so having partners out in the industry like Advantage Industrial Automation, Schneider Electric behind you to help add depth and context to that information is how you're going to have to unlock that information, right? It's impossible for any single individual to do all that. And again, I've been in this industry for 24 years. You've been here for 30. Yeah. And I would venture to say that neither one of us could sit down in front of all those systems today and then instantly turn that into decision making, right? So, but then we see this evolution of being able to now automate the analytics in that business insight, in that middle piece, and turn it into proactive solutions, benefits through these consultative services. And so you can reduce costs by automating a lot of your processes, a lot of the control of your distributed energy resources. You can create a tie with your customer. If you're a partner like Advantage, where now you're co-owning the responsibility for turning out these benefits. But it's now we're automating the analytics, so that you don't have to pour through the data and find the patterns. You have the intelligence in the background helping find the patterns. Now you just have to add the context of your business to it in order to turn that into value. And so what we see in this digital journey is, various people will be in various steps of this. As we talked about, there was a period of time where a lot of people were investing in those connectable or connected products, right? All that data gathering out there. Some people may just be starting that journey today. But regardless, you can't manage what you can't measure, right? And so you have to start by adding these devices into your production system, into your electrical distribution system, to start recording what is going on. From there, you can, at the hardware level, start making decisions to automate, right? So my meter will talk to your PLC, and through that PLC, you can make these decisions, switch things on, switch things off. And that can stay right in that hardware and networking layer. But then the next opportunity is to step up into that software layer, right? Whenever you start connecting these intelligent systems to software, you start providing real-time visibility through animated one lines and things. You start adding things like trending and year-over-year comparisons, that kind of stuff. Well, a person can absorb that information and can start making some contextual-based decisions based on that. Then you'll see those decisions in your business to start optimizing around the patterns that you're seeing. But ultimately, digital maturity ends with what I call orchestration, right? There's those things that get automated that start taking care of themselves. It allows you, as the conductor of everything that's going on in your business, to then focus on certain areas at any given time, to go then and put in these improvement projects that you want to kind of further the automation, right? Ultimately, what you're trying to get to is data-driven, proactive maintenance practices, right? Seeing a problem start to rise, seeing the symptom of a problem and addressing the symptom and taking care of it at the root before it causes an outage, before you run an asset to failure, right? You want to be able to say, look, that thing's aging prematurely based on the data I'm seeing. I'm going to take a controlled shutdown. I'm going to do it in my time. I'm going to be prepared. We're going to do it in a short order, and we're going to get this thing back up and running, rather than reacting to what's going on in your system when the outage goes down, when the lights go out, when the process stops, and everybody's in panic mode. And what we see, from a practical return on investment, is that 87% of organizations that have a strategy to move up that maturity index to digitize their infrastructure and to really proactively use that information to automate these maintenance practices, 87% of those folks see significant return on that investment, right? So this isn't just a nice to have. There was a time where people would look at this and say, well, as long as the breaker's on, the power's flowing, that's great, and it'd be nice if I could meter it. Now you have to have it. It's the only way for you to leverage those assets and turn them into an opportunity to continue to create efficiencies in your business, to get squeeze as much out of that electric bill as you can, right? And save money, save downtime, make it safer for your employees, right? Understanding what's going on out there to, arc flash calculations and, coordination studies and all that kind of stuff come right out of this data. And you can model it based on nameplate ratings, or you can model it based on real information. How's my facility actually work? It makes a big difference. And so when you look at achieving your business outcomes, we really break this down into it's 3 different value props and sort of an overriding feature set that is table stakes, right? If I really said, what do you gain out of this? What are the opportunities for improvement in our businesses? It's 1, to make things safe and reliable. I want my workforce healthy when they leave the day, just as they were when they showed up. And I want my processes running, right? I've got to be turning out product. I've got to be taking care of that patient in the hospital. I've got to keep my data center running, whatever it is, the business that you're in. If it's not running, the rest of it doesn't matter. But once you get past that initial value proposition and making sure it's safe, it's running, and it's reliable, then I've got to make it efficient, right? The way I use that energy has to be efficient. The way I leverage distributed energy resources have to be efficient for me to turn that into cost savings. Those 2 things, along with other green practices, whether it's use of renewable resources like solar or wind or those types of things, or it's recycling practices and things like that that people do in their business, that all adds up to what is your sustainability story, right? And so it's, as I said before, companies are valued on whether or not they have a sustainability strategy today. And if you want to be able to tell that story, these are the very practical ways that you say, look, this is what we're implementing. This is how we're reaching those sustainability goals. And then all of that is underpinned, like I said, by this transverse value of cybersecurity. There's just, unfortunately, it's one of those things we have to deal with in the electronic world. There are people out there that want to leverage these electronic devices to try and do harm. They want to just do damage to a company, whatever the case may be. Some of it's just for fun or for whatever reason. But if you don't put in a cybersecure infrastructure, then you're just setting yourself up for another risk, right? And so underpinning all of that value is the need to make your infrastructure cyber secure. So if we dive into some of these value props very quickly, again, we're trying to take this big challenge. We're just breaking it into these very practical things that we can focus on. And the real challenge here is to not get overwhelmed with the total challenge, not to get overwhelmed with the total number of opportunities that are out there, but it's to pick a few of these, right? Pick one at a time and turn that into some sort of return on investment for your business. And so if we dive into safety, first and foremost, we want our workforce to be safe. We want the infrastructure that we put in to work safely and create a healthy environment for our employees. And when we're talking about power monitoring systems, we're really talking about reducing that risk of electrical fires that we talked about a little earlier, that 22% of all fires that start up originate in your electrical system. And we want to protect those staffs and occupants from things like shock and arc flash. So when we look at the topic of safety, first and foremost, it's about raising awareness. Again, I can't manage what I can't measure. And if I'm looking at things like insulation breakdown, if I'm looking at things like thermal alarms, rising temperatures within my equipment and that kind of stuff, that helps me understand where there is now growing risk in my facility. Now, once I have that awareness and I can then digitize and manage some of that information, some of the automation that I put together to help manage that. It's understanding, am I overloading circuits? It's another form of heat, right? You overload conductors, breaker doesn't trip properly or something. If it's not properly maintained, another source of fire. I can look at my trends, right? I can see over time that there is a rising temperature. I can see over time there's rising load in this area because of bad bearings in a motor or whatever, right? It's putting excess stress on that infrastructure that if I just looked at the nameplate rating of the motor, I'm fine, right? Things should be working just fine. But these trends will show you where these issues are starting to rise. And then ultimately, you want to analyze and optimize. And this is what we were talking about earlier. We now have the opportunity to grab all that data, push it into the cloud, and through machine learning, artificial intelligence, those types of things, it'll really crunch all that data. And where the human eye, the human brain may not even pick up on patterns, those analytics can, right? So it'll reveal things to you that you may not otherwise see or may not otherwise have just the mind share to sit down and analyze for yourself. We couple that with expertise from the teams like Advantage Industrial, where we can go in then and consult with a customer on the context of their business and their challenges, what the data is telling us are the rising issues, and then you can prioritize for yourself. What do we want to tackle? What do we need to tackle? When we talk about reliability and power availability, right, it's about taking these invisible problems and making them visible, right? It's about enhancing my ability to manage that electrical asset and avoiding that unplanned downtime. And so when we were talking earlier a little bit about protection coordination and things like that, right? There's a lot of modeling that's done when people are building electrical infrastructure through programs like ETAP, for example, and that's where they put together the calculations to come up with these coordination studies. What are the settings in my breakers and relays that keep an isolated event from cascading through my facility and causing major outages? Well, one of the beauties of the digital world now is, again, I can still manually go around and collect nameplate ratings, and I can still do that modeling as a starting point, but we can then take that, what was a static model, we can exchange data with these monitoring systems, and we can retest that coordination against actual loaded conditions. You can simulate what if scenarios. What if I add more onto my facility, another line? What if I add more load to this circuit? And you can see how that really does change in your system based on how it's operating today. It's also a way to identify, through these monitoring systems, underlying power quality issues. A lot of times in facilities, especially when you've got a lot of motors and drives and things like that, you'll start seeing harmonics that'll show up, right? To the naked eye, you'll never see it. Your infrastructure is built with enough capacity to kind of handle all of the rogue currents and things that come out of that. But at the end of the day, those harmonics, if they get severe enough, can actually trip some of your sensitive electronic equipment offline. So motor drives, for example, can be susceptible to those things where you get what I'll call trashy power with all these harmonics in it, right? And it'll trip your processes offline. So having visibility to that, understanding what the harmonic content is, allows you then to do simple things like put in a harmonic filter, right? You know what you're going to need to tune it to in order to mitigate the harmonics that you have in your system. And right at the source, you can take care of the problem, right, locally. And if you put that filtering near the source of those harmonics, then it keeps it from dispersing itself throughout your facility, right? So you really kind of get it at the root of the problem. And then again, you want to use these analytics to optimize the maintenance of your assets. If a device is prematurely aging because excessive heat, excessive humidity, excessive operations of a breaker, whatever the case may be, you can look at your manufacturer's guidelines for a time-based maintenance schedule. But if you're operating under those extreme conditions, if you look at the manuals, that timeline shrinks. Well, a lot of times it's a simple qualitative sort of a measure that says in a harsh environment it shrinks, under normal conditions it's this, under ideal conditions it's that. Well, how do you quantify what is a harsh environment? We have to monitor the environment in which it's working. You have to monitor how many times that asset is activating. one of the simplest things, actually, one of the what I'll call the low-hanging fruit here is identifying efficiency opportunities. And as you opened up, Bert, you had talked about all the various different ways that you can attack that, right? It could be process efficiency. You know, if I can get a more efficient drive, I can get a more efficient motor, I can automate things in a certain way. I can really create efficiencies through operational changes like that. But a lot of times your efficiency just starts with understanding what you're getting billed for. How am I using my electricity today, right? And so when we look at energy efficiency, opportunity to reduce carbon emissions as part of our sustainability story, ultimately we're trying to achieve that efficiency because we're trying to reduce cost, right? The best way to raise your awareness of how you're using energy is to shadow meter your utility. Compare that to the bill you get, and then really start breaking that down and understanding not just what am I consuming in kilowatt hours, but what other penalties am I incurring because of the way I operate, right? So some of these operational efficiencies, if you can do things like reduce your peak demand, you reduce overhead penalties. If you can do things like correct your power factor so that you're more efficiently leveraging the infrastructure that's built to feed your facility, then ultimately you can reduce your utility bill as well. And so verifying energy bills, low-hanging fruit, you know, 1 meter, one shadow meter on the backside of your utility meter, and you're off and running, right? You can do energy allocation, right? As you're trying to drive sustainability and efficiency practices throughout your organization, one great way to do that is to monitor the energy that process or that function or that section of your business is using and challenge, right? You know, we need to reduce that by 10%, 5%, whatever that goal is to meet your goals overall. But it's a way to get more granular in the decisions that you're making. And so over time, what could start out as 1 meter's worth of investment at the utility can then be propagated down throughout your system over the course of a long time, not necessarily having to take on the whole thing at once. And then finally, as we talk about sustainability, everything that we've already talked about, right? Making yourself more energy efficient, reducing your carbon footprint, efficient design of your infrastructure, you know, not buying more steel and copper than you have to in the way you design your facility. All of that really does contribute to your sustainability story as a company. But there's also other things now. So as we'd opened up, you know, distributed energy resources, green, renewable sources of energy like solar and wind, those are getting added to facilities. Well, how do we manage that, right? How do we optimize our use of those resources coupled with what we buy from the utility to create a resilient infrastructure, but also an energy efficient, cost-effective infrastructure? And it can be overwhelming for a human being to try to process all of the various inputs to make those decisions. And so what we talk about really is taking control of your energy production at the end of the day. As you integrate these various DERs, as you tie it then into the grid, you know, there's things like what is electricity costing me today versus what is fuel costing me today for a diesel generator, for example. There are weather patterns that may disrupt how efficient your solar panels are and those types of things. And so, you know, depending on whether I'm on peak or off peak on the utility rates, you know, can I generate when it's an on peak cost and can I then import from the utility when I'm off peak? Decisions like that can be made through these digital automated systems and couple that with all of the intelligence that comes in from the cloud, right? Weather services and energy cost services and all that kind of stuff. And put the computer to work for you. Have it making those decisions and not just making those decisions, but then at the end of the day, spitting out a report that can show you real energy savings that you've achieved with that infrastructure. You know, you can take that to your executive team and say, look, we want to take that savings. We want to turn it into the next project, right? And go just drive the savings as a part of the culture we're trying to drive as a part of our sustainability story, the things that we're doing really to use less of the common planet. And then you hand that off to the executive team, go communicate that to the market, right? These are the good things that we're doing as a company to do our part not just to make our company more sustainable, but to contribute to the greater good through the use of these green assets. And now again, as you talk about all of this digital meeting room infrastructure and pushing things to the cloud and, edge software and automation products, and, we talk about the risk associated with cybersecurity. And really it starts with resilient design. But as we know, those threats aren't static, right? New threats arise every day. A new virus is created, a new softness or vulnerability is discovered. People are going to exploit that, right? And so, your first line of defense is start with products that are developed with cybersecurity in mind. There is a certain level of cybersecurity built right into that product because we used to think about virus attacks and cyber attacks and things being on our computers, on our servers, and ransomware and all the things that we've been exposed to over the course of many years. But what we're seeing now is a rise in attacks on this intelligent infrastructure. As devices are penetrated through cyber attacks, settings can be changed. It can be doing one thing, reporting another. There's all kinds of weird things like that these folks try to wreak havoc in a facility that they'll implement. But you've got to protect against that. It starts with that cybersecure device. But it doesn't just stop there, right? As we build out cybersecurity, it's the device, it's the system, and then obviously the teamwork with your IT team to build out that cybersecure infrastructure around it. And so you get multiple layers of protection built in there. And then through expertise like Advantage has around cybersecurity and sort of building some of that in, along with some of the services that Schneider has. And again, just good design practices, building it in from the get-go. We can do things like cybersecurity audits. We can help with design criteria for how can you make your infrastructure more cyber secure. And then ultimately, it's about how do you maintain that cybersecurity in the changing face of threats. You put in systems that allow you to manage firmware upgrades, right? As vulnerabilities are assessed, as they are mitigated through good design practice, as companies roll out patches to firmware. Oftentimes we find ourselves kind of going device to device and having to download firmware. It's a lot of activity, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of aggravation. When you're opening up control panels and electrical distribution boards, you're now exposing your people to possible safety hazards, right? Depending on the operating conditions. And so if we can do that remotely, if we can do broad fleet management across the board without necessarily having to go out and open up some of those panels, then things like that really help tie this whole story together, this whole value prop together. So your cybersecurity is an inherent part of the infrastructure you're using to drive that reliability, that safety, that energy efficiency. And so, we started off with the big challenge, all of the macroeconomic things that are going on in the world, electricity 4.0 and what all that means. We talked about this digital journey, and the common thing, Bert, that I hear, I'm sure you hear the same thing from customers, is just, it's too much. It's just way too much for me to handle. I've got all these demands on me for sustainability, and I've got to drive efficiency, and I've got to do these things. And so, it's really about just sitting down, reaching out to a partner like Advantage and working through a strategy. You can draw a line to where you ultimately want to be, but you got to start somewhere, right? And it's about identifying that low-hanging fruit, that initial opportunity to go and implement some of this digitization, go and get some consultative services associated with it, and just, save energy today, turn that into the next investment, where you need to go. It's a journey. And you'll never achieve perfection in that, right? Every time you get all the way up to this orchestrate phase, there's going to be a new opportunity to go monitor something else, to go mitigate another issue, something that's been missed along the way, or there's going to be expansion in your facility and those types of things that introduce new opportunities, right? And so, but ultimately, again, look to the future. You don't have to bite it all off right now, but look to the future and say, if I really want to do these things well, what do I need to achieve? And I need to achieve an EcoStruxure, a system where through automation, through monitoring, through consultative services, the AI that we're talking about that kind of exposes these issues. I want a data-driven decision-making process on how I maintain my system, how I expand my system, how I optimize that energy usage. And so it really is about getting up into that automated asset management, right? It's the more proactive you are in addressing the issues, the more aware you are of the symptoms before they become problems, the more likely you are then to maintain your uptime, avoid those disruptions, the more likely you are to achieve that energy efficiency. It's sort of counterintuitive. You think about the money you spend on maintenance, but trust me, that maintenance, that proactive maintenance, is much less expensive than reacting to the problem after it happens. And so we see a real opportunity here, Bert, in the partnership with Advantage Industrial Automation to help customers plot that journey, to identify those opportunities, and just take that step at a time approach to getting to what is ultimate digital maturity. With that, I'll hand it back over to you, my good friend.
Great. Well, thank you, Mark. We covered a tremendous amount of content.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that from the time that I got into manufacturing in 1992, the quest was always, how do we turn this data into useful information? I started that. And what has happened over time is that a lot of enterprises have all this data that's out there.
Yeah.
And they just don't even know where to start.
Right.
And I think the biggest thing is that when you are going through this type of discussion, the biggest thing, or this kind of initiative, is to start off small.
Yeah.
Don't try and win everything all at once, or try and achieve everything all at once, because if you do that, then it becomes so overwhelming. And quite honestly, when you start to look at what is the return on investment, it's probably one of the most difficult things that our customers have to deal with, is trying to justify going out. What are we going to get back from this information? And it's starting off small so you can show a big payback right to start with, is really where we suggest people start.
Yeah, exactly. You create a bit of an investment snowball for yourself, right?
Yeah.
You get that first win, you get that return. One, it builds confidence in the organization that, yes, this is really going to pay off in the long run. And you hold that up, right? You share that culturally within the team, just to say, look, these things are achievable. But then you take that return, you invest in the next thing, right? Gaining visibility, adding, whether it's hardware infrastructure to gain that visibility, or whether it's the software to help now put it together in the same place, or a service associated with someone that can add the analytics and maybe some deeper subject matter expertise to what it is that you're already trying to achieve.
Okay. I'd like to open it up to any questions that anyone might have in the audience right now.
And feel free to use the chat function there and type in your question.
While we're waiting on that, I know everybody's on mute as well. One of the things that you covered that always seems to come up when we have these discussions with our end users. So we are coming from an OT side of the operational technology side of it.
Right.
And inevitably, when we start talking about cybersecurity, that is something that the IT people then generally will get involved in.
Right.
And a lot of times the IT and OT don't get along. There's a lot of friction back and forth.
Right.
So you mentioned IEC 62443.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit more about that, if you can.
Okay. Yeah. So IEC 62443 it's obviously it's because it's IEC, it's more of a European standard, but it's very close to NIST standards and things that you'll hear in the US market. But there's sort of these certification levels that they put on essentially how resilient is your product to cyber attack,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so in the IEC world, they call those SL, service level 1, 2, 3, and so on. And what that means for a company like Schneider is from the get-go, whenever we're designing a product, cybersecurity is a core part of the feature set we're building into it. And so we'll set a goal, based on those standards. Do we want this to be SL1, SL2, and then those design practices go into sort of that initial release. It doesn't stop there, right? So a lot of these devices, obviously, they're firmware inside of those. It's you can upgrade it in the field, and so as we evolve the product, one of the things that we do is also evolve the cybersecurity in that product. And
Right.
so you set it, you achieve level 1. Your next challenge is how do we make it more hardened against attack, and so you just build up that chain. So it becomes an inherent part of your design process, but that's also part of what you take to your IT team, right? So they're thinking, great, it's another electronic device. It's outside the norm of
Right.
my computer and my server that I'm used to managing. But when you have someone that understands the cybersecurity feature sets built into your OT infrastructure that can speak a little bit of that IT language, you can help sort of take some of the angst out of that, right? As you can show them that there are systems that are developed to help manage the vulnerabilities in these devices beyond what they're used to in their IT world. And it helps facilitate that conversation. It really takes
some of the barrier, some of the tension out of that conversation. I understand that one of the things that we also see is that one of the questions that comes up is, well, we don't allow anybody on our network. Well, okay, so just ask them if they're using any sort of cloud-based application, and 100% of all enterprises are using cloud-based applications, whether they realize it or not.
Right.
And so that's one way to get beyond that. And then in the case of the digitizing the information regarding power assets, it's important to note that we are just having unidirectional data flow. So there's not bidirectional data flow. And what we've seen with that discussion as we go through that with our customers, the IT people get a little bit less adverse to trying this type of technology out. So
yeah, that's correct. It's like you said, most companies are using some sort of cloud-based service today. Travel and expense systems, a lot of that's hosted, time systems, whatever the case is. But you're right, with this intelligent infrastructure, if you want to push that to the cloud for some of these advanced analytics, we really do package up the data there locally within the confines of their IT infrastructure. It goes out, right? The analytics are done in a secure cloud. So even that piece is industrially hardened and cyber secure. But we don't take that data then and just push it back down into your facility, right? And create automated operational decisions. The next step in that is really about consulting then with the client on, here's the findings, what's important to you, and then within the confines of my infrastructure, again, what do I want to implement? You've got to be very intentional about that. And so we're not introducing new threats by opening up sort of this big hole in their cybersecurity infrastructure.
Right. So I think that the other thing important to note is that, and I said this at the intro, is that not every industry and not every application is going to need an overarching approach.
Right.
So it might be in one case that some of the services and the applications that we deploy against that are specific to that customer and specific to that process. I think that just like my kids, sometimes I get too into the thinking about the end goal rather than thinking about the process that you have to go through to get to the point that you want to get. And you said this well earlier, is that this is a journey, it's not a destination. Exactly. So it's something that you get a continuous feedback as you continue to improve and refine what you understand about your power assets. And with everything that we have going on as a country right now, all of the energy issues we face worldwide, there's not a better time to be analyzing this and really be thinking about where I want to be. But the important part of that is, let's break this down into steps on where I've got to go in order to get to the final goal.
Yeah, exactly. And each organization's focus is going to be slightly different, right? Some are more focused on energy efficiency, for example. Some might be more focused on reliability, depending on the industry you're in, depending on the impact to your business. A data center uptime is everything, right? That thing goes down, you're just not making money, right? Whereas Hospitals, again, uptime is everything. The patient care is really important. And so you'll see hyper-focus depending on the industry on one thing or the other as a starting point. But inevitably, what happens every time I've seen this, you start with sort of that most pressing issue,
Mhm.
and then they start realizing some of these other benefits. And actually, oftentimes, the secondary benefit, or what was the secondary benefit in their mind, starts paying the most dividends at the end of the day, right? But that's the beauty of it, right? An investment in any one of these areas is not lost. It's just more intelligence in the infrastructure that ultimately contributes to that whole value story.
Exactly.
Yeah. We had a question here in the
Excuse me,
chat.
Mark, Bert,
Yes.
there are a few chat questions. If you could address those, please.
Okay, let me, okay, so Mark, if there is a number of hardware manufacturers in a facility, is that an issue in implementing these types of solutions?
It's a good question, right? So interoperability is one of the big things, big challenges that people face as a mental roadblock as they go into this. Am I hemmed into one manufacturer? I already have an investment in XYZ products. Is that going to help here? The nice thing about what we do at Schneider Electric, and honestly what most of the industry is trying to drive toward, is open infrastructure, right? And so we have systems in place. Again, I've done this for many years, and for years, right? We have tied to products that are manufactured by someone else. We can extract the information out of those devices. We can couple that with all the information that comes out of a Schneider device, and help make some of these decisions. Now, just transparently, sometimes you'll run into a limitation, right? The type of information that's available via that more open connection might be slightly limited. There might be technologies that people are using for advanced features like waveform capture and that kind of stuff that it takes an extra step, right, to exchange that data sometimes through a common format like Comtrade or something. But the opportunities do exist for the free exchange of that data and for tying into that existing infrastructure. We don't want anybody to feel like they've wasted an investment. We want to make sure that we're using what's already there to the best of our abilities. Yeah. Okay. So good question.
What standards exist to help make the data collection investment brand agnostic?
Yeah. So the standards associated with this is really it depends on what layer you're integrating, right? And so one layer of integration is the hardware layer, and through open standards like Modbus protocol and things like that that are openly published, and people publish their registered lists and things like that. That's one way that you can access that data. The other is standards in data exchange formats, right? Database to database. And so I may already have a software that's collecting things and stored in a database. And there's several mechanisms that exist for, what they call extraction transition layers and all that kind of stuff, where you can kind of package up the data out of that database, push it over, reformat it into the format that I need, and exchange it that way. And so it's, some of these things I would say are existing standards that have been around a long time, like the Modbus protocol, that are actually evolving into things like secure Modbus protocol, as we look at that cybersecurity issue. And there are new standards being developed every day for data exchange, at that either at the edge layer or even the cloud layer.
Absolutely. And just to kind of build on what Mark's saying is that Advantage has a tremendous amount of experience in helping to bridge the gap to where the data exists on the factory floor and aggregating that data, not just internally within Advantage, but then we also bring Schneider into that as well. But it's a very good question, because typical manufacturers will have multiple vendors. Sometimes I don't even know those vendors are out there, that are just sitting there. They've just been logging data for a long time, and we have the expertise in-house to help with that. Yeah. And then next question is, how do I get started? Well, the first step at the beginning of the presentation, both Mark and I have our contact information, and you can email us. We would love to have a conversation with you and just talk to you about how to get started on this digital journey for your power assets. So that's probably the easiest way to get started. There also, it's part of the presentation, and one of the slides that Mark presented, there is a digital journey, if you will, document that's very informative that you can actually kind of narrow down. It'll start with what you're trying to do and where you want to go, what your final result or what your final goal is going to be. And that document's very good. It's available via a link in one of the slides, and you'll see that we will be sending out within the next couple of days. You'll get an email from me with this link to the webinar as well as the presentation. But that all starts there. And then the last question we had in the chat was, based on your experience and customers, what group is best to be subject matter expertise at end users? On-site maintenance techs or corporate engineering guiding the plants? Do you want me to answer that, or would you like to go ahead?
Well, we can both take a crack at it because we both have experience dealing with this, right? And the truth is, I think value can be extracted, at multiple layers within an organization, right? I think anybody that touches this infrastructure in some way can be a consumer of that and can be an expert, in many ways. Obviously, your corporate facilities engineers will have what I'll call that broad-based view of everything and how it should work. The beauty of your on-site maintenance tech is they know all the skeletons, right? And they know, to the device, how things operate. And so, and it feels like a wishy-washy answer, and it's not meant to be that way. But, I would say, it starts with where you have greenfield opportunity, your SMEs at corporate, right? Designing this stuff in from the beginning would be where I would start. And their ability then to look at one facility versus another, maybe similar processes. Is this one operating as efficiently or effectively as that one? Am I seeing more downtime in one than the other? There's a certain amount of responsibility associated with becoming the subject matter expert in how all that's utilized. But I would tell you from a maintenance standpoint, your local maintenance crew at the facility, being consumers of the information, helping guide that digital maintenance plan. They know what devices in that infrastructure have given them the most problems, which processes are kind of harder on the equipment, that kind of stuff. And so locally, they can help guide that asset management plan for you as well. So it doesn't neatly fit anywhere, where it's like, this is the ultimate person. That's my experience so far. It really takes teamwork, and to me, this reeks of culture inside of an organization, right? It's if you really drive a sustainability culture, if everybody is invested in getting the return on energy efficiency and helping contribute to that company value story, then everybody's voice is important in that, and everybody becomes engaged in that when they see that their input, the information they're allowed to provide, the context they add to all this data from their experience is valued, and that turns into that return. It just energizes an organization, right? So I'd be careful about just sort of pinning it to a person. I'd take it on as a part of my culture.
One of the things that we've started to see in a couple of instances is that a company will have a chief digital officer.
Yes.
So obviously that is a person at a high level. And then the other thing we're starting to see is at a plant level, we're starting to see operations managers take on more of that responsibility than what they have in the past. And sometimes what we found is that those people may not be as comfortable with the digital side of it. They're very good with all of the power equipment in there.
Right.
And so that's an opportunity to have a conversation with them about moving to a predictive maintenance, like what you discussed during the presentation, and actually focusing our efforts on areas that we may not even know about before they become a problem. So you'll see the operations manager, also see facilities managers taking on more and more of that role in the discussions that we've had. It's typically not controls engineers that we have dealt with, because we have been so focused on factory floor automation that's really where we're having conversations with people that maybe we haven't touched so much in the past, because a lot of times you put a new piece of switch gear and distribution equipment in, and you forget about it. It just runs and everything's fine until there's an electrical fire or somebody gets hurt or we've got some unplanned downtime because we've got a harmonic issue in
Right.
one area of the plant. And so, again, this is all about being proactive. And what's so great about it, you mentioned the Modbus protocol. There are tons of different protocols that different devices speak. Okay, it all starts with that. And that's really something that Advantage helps bridge the gap on that in terms of understanding how we can get that data. First of all, we got to aggregate the data, and then we have to work with the customer as well as some of our vendor partners like Schneider to help turning that into useful information.
Yeah.
So.
No, and you know, and thinking about those last two questions that we've just gone through, you know, how do I get started and who should be your SMEs and those types of things. The thing that really resonates with me when I work with customers is first KPIs. You know, it's funny
Yes.
coming from a
Oh, yeah.
digital monitoring guy,
Yeah.
measurements drive behavior in people, right? And so if you really want to understand who's most invested in needing to become a subject matter expertise or is being looked to drive this digital transformation journey, look at their KPIs, right?
Yes.
What are they getting measured on? And I can guarantee you that person's going to have focus on those things, right?
That's right.
And you know, it's the reason I say it ties those two things together is one, that'll help you pinpoint maybe sort of the ultimate person in your organization that's responsible for it. But two, the how do I get started? You know, in these consultative meetings with a partner like AIA, you know, the customer, if they're willing to reveal, look, I'm challenged, you know, I've got to reduce my energy by 10%, or I've got to reduce downtime by X%, or my company's challenging me to be more green in the way we generate our power, whatever those KPIs are, that'll guide you to where do I get started, right? Because that's what's important to that company. That's why it's a KPI for that individual. And that should help facilitate the discussions on, okay, you know, what discovery do we need to do in whatever area shows up in those KPIs to help guide those decisions on getting started.
Yeah. All right. Great. Well, I hope we have answered the questions in the chat for now, but if anything comes up, feel free to reach out to Mark and I via email. It is, as I said, there'll be the presentation as well as the video for the webinar will be available here in the next couple of days, and it will be sent out to everyone that attended. We greatly appreciate your time, and we're up upon the 11:30. So we appreciate everybody taking an hour out of their busy schedules, and look forward to hopefully talking to you guys later and or in the near future and helping you on your digital journey.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you, Bert, for having me today.
It was a pleasure. Thanks, Mark. We'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.